4 mellow horses stand grazing in various shady corners, but we're headed for one in particular, Chemakoh, who is a beautiful reddish-brown with patches of white. "He's my soulmate," says Khachaturi, and calls out his name as we get closer. He's waiting for her at the gate, and she leans right into his broad face, cooing, "How are you? How's my baby?" He shudders and flicks his tail and looks back at her intently through fist-size eyes. "I had to fight for him," she says now, feeding him carrots out of her open palm. "I made a lot of noise. I took a lot of pictures and videos of the abuse. And when I was not allowed to take him on site, I said to him when I was leaving, 'You've got to remember me, because I'm going to come back for you.' I promised I was going to get him out." Volunteers soon delivered him to Khachaturi's house in Sedona. There were about 8 people there that day, but he got off the trailer and whinnied and walked right over to me, she recalls. "It's like he was saying, 'Hey, you came back for me.'" She named him Chemakoh, a Pima, Native American, term that refers to 2 souls that come together in destiny, and though she'd had 0 experience with horses before his arrival, she began to love and nourish him back to health. And so did her clients, bereaved parents who would come to see Khachaturi for intense private sessions, and soon find themselves drawn to the rescued horse in her backyard. Seeing those connections, fostered between grieving humans and the badly abused horse, was ultimately what led Khachaturi to the idea of opening Sila, on land embraced by canyons and pine thickets and the iconic Red Rock Mountains. Just 5 months in and not yet fully up and running, the Care Farm is already home to a fast-growing menagerie of rescued horses, sheep, dogs, and, so far just 1, pig. And it is a unicorn of a place, where people can come and find solace after suffering the death of a loved one, often through bonding with an animal, such as Chemakoh, who truly seems to understand. This farm is a place where people can go in their trauma and grief and get some space, and just be with their authentic emotions, Khachaturi says, adding that the name comes from the Hebrew Selah, meaning an interlude during which to pause and reflect. There aren't very many places like that in the world, where you can have that space and freedom to just be. Selah's comforts are simple but immense, gained by caring acts like brushing a pig, feeding a baby sheep its bottle, putting one's hands into the warm earth to plant flowers, or just sitting and crying under an almond tree. It's this cycle of compassion from human to animal and earth and back again that Khachaturi hopes will be the heartbeat here. "I believe that the people who have suffered are the peacemakers in this world," she says. "If we can stay with our pain and stay with our grief, we can know a compassion that is boundless, and we can enact that in the world. It doesn't make it okay that that person we loved most in the world died, and it shouldn't. And yet we still can bring that love to the world in an amazing way." Or as So, who owns horses, says, "I sometimes find myself more able to relate to animals than people. We're all these sentient, living beings, and to be able to look into the eyes of an animal who has been through trauma and is learning how to live day by day, just like me? It's powerful." The practice of care farming has gained a toehold in countries including the Netherlands, Australia, and the UK, where there are currently 250 care farms operating and another 100 in formation, according to a recent report from the nonprofit Care Farming UK. In the US, besides Sila, there are only 3 known setups, 2 in Oregon, Fawn Hills and Sanctuary 1, and another in California called Kindred Spirits, mostly serving the youth and the elderly through informal volunteer offerings that involve rescue animals. Earlier this year, she released her 4th book, Bearing the Unbearable: Love, Loss and the Heartbreaking Path of Grief, to much acclaim. And despite spending an inordinate amount of time talking, thinking and hearing about death, Khachaturi exudes a deep, glowing joy and a fierce, unwavering presence. But, she says, for a while, after Cheyenne died, she remained in shock and immobile. She wept frequently. "I had dogs at the time, and I used to say my dogs and my 3-year-old were the only beings that could stand to be around me without trying to change how I felt, without trying to cheer me up or make me better," she recalls. They just accepted when I cried and just accepted my grief when none of the adults around me could. Eventually, she came upon the writings of Rich Gorman, an England-based postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Exeter with expertise in care farming. It's an area no one has really looked at before, so I was fascinated, Gorman says, referring to the pairing of care farming and grief. The most exciting thing for me was her story about Chemakoh, and this use of bringing human and animal care together. Gorman headed to Sedona, where the two set to work creating a blueprint for this rare respite center and writing a meticulous review on their vision, publishing it in the journal Health and Place. The actual house of the Sela House, which will have room enough to shelter several families at a time, has yet to be constructed, as land was only just purchased in August by Khachaturi and her engineer husband, a super-duper private dude who prefers to remain in the background. For now, visitors either live in the area or stay at a small guest house adjacent to Khachaturi's own, just a few miles away. Fundraising toward a goal of $585,000 has been a painstaking process. Still, contractors have built a barn for Chemakoh and his cohorts, and there is a steady sound here of hammering and digging, as groups of volunteers come together to take on tasks from irrigating the land to hacking down overgrown bamboo thickets and planting flowers around what already feels like a magical corner of the world. An essential part of Sela is the community of support and understanding among fellow mourners that the programs aim to build. It's something those who are grieving say they cherish when found, though it's often difficult to find in a society that desperately wants them to keep busy and move on, and when they don't, that often moves on instead. We lost a lot of friends, recalls Rayanne Wood. She and her wife, Sarah Toig, began working with Khachaturi after their son, Noah, was stillborn in 2010. They couldn't handle the grief, they couldn't handle our pain, they didn't know how to respond. I think they wanted us to be better, to get over it. Thompson, who now helms the Ronan Thompson Foundation, is writing a memoir of her loss, and has a large and loyal social media following, spent time during Ronan's treatment meting out heartbreaking updates through her blog, Rockstar Ronan. It went viral after attracting the attention of Taylor Swift, and the pop star eventually wrote a song about the blue-eyed boy using one of Thompson's posts as lyrics. But in the early days of her son's treatment, a well-meaning friend suggested to Thompson, who was sobbing, that she get herself on antidepressant medication, not a rare suggestion for the bereaved, which she did. I didn't know what I was doing, she recalls, as Wilbur the pig rubs up against her ankle as if he were a cat. I thought it would help, so I saw someone and they put me on a cocktail of so many different things, and I went through Ronan's treatment very numb. But instead of providing comfort, she now knows, the drugs simply pushed away the inevitable. Once I was off those medications, I feel like I was able to start the healing process a bit, says Thompson. I know I was suicidal when I was on them. I didn't ever want to be numb to my pain. Though her grief shifted in a life-altering way after she started working with Khachaturi, she says, there's never a second that I'm not carrying the grief with me. It never goes away. The idea of fighting grief by pushing it away or deadening it with psychotropic medications or other substances is a distinct